book lovers, it is G-Swiss here, and I'm here today with some spooky and creepy book recommendations. If you didn't know, this is a 7 on Sunday topic, and I am the host of 7 on Sunday. I will link the Goodreads page down in the description where you can check it out and you can participate in a topic in the future, or you can suggest a topic. And funnily enough, this year my birthday lands on a Sunday, which means this is going up on my birthday or after my birthday, depending on where the time zone is. Yes, my birthday is October 29th. In the spirit of Halloween, we've been doing like spooky 7 on Sunday topics. We started off with some cozy paranormal reads. We moved on to the like paranormal romances and the monster romances, and now we end at the darker stuff. This is Halloween weekend, therefore we are going to talk about the spooky and creepy reads we have. Unlike a lot of spooky and creepy book readers, I am not necessarily into horror, so not every book on this recommendations list today is going to be exclusively horror. There's going to be a few that are exclusively horror, and there's going to be like maybe a graphic one here or there, but there are a few on here for the vibes. If anyone is wanting to get into some spooky and creepy reads, or they're just wanting to read something that's atmospheric for this time. So I have all sorts of recommendations today on this list, and I am basing all these recommendations on the books that I've read within the year that I would recommend. I plan to do this video every year, so I hope to compile more recommendations in the future. I have done one of these in the past. I will link that somewhere if you want to go check that one out as well. So I guess without further ado, let's get straight into some spooky and creepy reads that I would recommend for the season, or anytime you feel like reading a spooky or creepy read. The first spooky / creepy book that I would have to recommend is one for the vibes. I don't know if this technically classifies as horror, but I did find it to be somewhat creepy because it's meant to be somewhat of a fractured fairy tale. I mean, when we're talking about Alice in Wonderland, sometimes it can be creepy. I mean, have you seen Tim Burton's version? Here I have Escaping Wonderland by Tiffany Roberts. This is technically a monster romance, but some of the Wonderland creatures are really creepy in the story, and technically Escaping Wonderland is more of a sci-fi rather than a paranormal or a fantasy, because everyone is basically trapped in this simulation of Wonderland. And it is also kind of scary because Alice's family, or at least the family that married into her family, like her step family rather, they sell her to this corporation in order to join this experiment. And oh my goodness, I would be so creeped out if that were the case for me. And the reason why they do that is because they want Alice's inheritance. Yeah, terrible stuff. This book I could not put down though. I was obsessed with this book from the moment I started it. I just needed to know what happened next, and I found this version of Wonderland to be absolutely creepy, so that is why I put it on this list. If you're wanting the creepy vibes but you're not wanting to read an explicit or exclusive horror, then I would recommend Escaping Wonderland, as I believe it has that. So that is why I'm putting it as the first recommendation here. This one's definitely on the lighter end of things, but it's still pretty creepy. And I want to go back and read it because I did enjoy the story, but the Wonderland concept kind of also creeps me out at the same time. And another spooky / creepy book that I would recommend that isn't outright horror, but does have horror themes in it and does skew a little older, is Silver Under Nightfall by Rin Chupeco. I found this one to be a lot at times because of all the blood. Because technically this book contains vampires and zombie-like creatures, and at times I was a little creeped out, but I did enjoy my read. And additionally, what I noticed with Rin Chupeco's works is that they tend to have somewhat of a creep factor to older books, at least from what I've read so far, because I believe this time last year I also recommended the Bone Witch trilogy by Rin Chupeco, which was pretty creepy. But I'd have to say this dials it up a little bit, but then again the setting is much different and we are following different characters as well. If you didn't know, Silver Under Nightfall is the first book in a new series by Rin Chupeco. I don't know whether this is going to be a duology or not, but I kind of hope that it's a trilogy. I would like to follow all three characters at the center, because as much as I did enjoy Remy, I kind of wish that even though this was in third-person perspective, I was kind of hoping that narratively the story would follow more characters rather than just Remy, because at times he walks into a room and we have the book following him him doing what he's doing, but there's so much more going on in the background, so I'm hoping that Rinchipeko takes that feedback and applies it to the sequel or the sequels within the series, because that is where the book kind of lost me. So it does have a bit of a messy third-person POV style. However, I did still enjoy the story overall, and I found it kind of creepy. I really don't want to live in this world at all whatsoever, and I reckon that Silver Under Nightfall has all the perfect Halloween vibes. So I would recommend this story, and I would recommend pretty much anything by Rinchipeko this time of year. I haven't read more from them, but I'm pretty sure they've written more creepy books previously, so I will eventually check their backlist out, but I do highly recommend Silver Under Nightfall if you're wanting a book with all the vibes and with all the creep. And the next spooky and creepy book that I would recommend for this list today is a young adult book that I recently read, and that, my friends, is City of Nightmares by Rebecca Schaeffer. It's getting pretty hot, so I'm putting my hair up. Now, technically, City of Nightmares was the first book I read by Rebecca Schaeffer, but I do believe, based on seeing their backlist, that they have written creepy books before. I mean, Not Even Bones looks creepy. I don't know if I want to touch that book with a 9-foot pole, honestly, because I think when I see, like, blood on a cover, I don't know, I get the ick. But I do want to try them out eventually, because I hear that Rebecca Schaeffer is an excellent writer. City of Nightmares is a very quick young adult read. This book was so quick. It's under 400 pages, and it's the first in a duology. I kind of wish that this book was a little longer. I kind of also wish that the full story was a standalone, but that all being said, if you're wanting a quick and spooky read, City of Nightmares has that for you. I was really creeped out by the concept of this. Pretty much, people are turning into their own nightmares in this world, and there is some secret society that is meant to help either exterminate them or just to keep the city at peace, essentially. And it's just wild to see what people turn into. Like, I was very creeped out, and I was not only creeped out by what people were turning into, I was also creeped out by the higher power who was turning people into their nightmares. Oh my goodness. The thought of them doing that just, like, terrified me, personally. Very much looking forward to the sequel. I kind of wish I got to know these characters much better, because even though I felt like I got to know some of them, I didn't get attached to them as much as I did the other two books that I had mentioned previously, but I did appreciate a very quick and creepy read that is perfect for those who like vigilante books. And the next book that I have to recommend for the spooky and creepy book recommendations video is probably like one of the best out of the bunch, in my personal opinion, and that, my friends, is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This was my first 5 out of 5 star read this year, and I told myself I needed to reread it around Halloween period, and so I did this year, and oh my goodness, I love it just as much. So if you didn't know, A Dowry of Blood is inspired by Dracula and Dracula's brides, and it is a very tragic story. I kind of like that the protagonist, Constanza, decides not to give the Dracula-like character a name. She just refers to him as you. This book is also told in second person as well. I appreciate that, because the Dracula-like figure in the story is very abusive and manipulative, and it is very sad to see. So this book isn't just like grotesque, it's also quite sad. It is quite the horror to live with this Dracula. It was terrifying, honestly, because this is a story for survivors. However, I do appreciate Constanza's growth journey, her healing journey, and her survival journey. I appreciate her as a character, and I love the side characters as well in the story, and I love the outcome of the story overall as well. But honestly, I did find that this book was just a true horror. And not really, because it is very much like a horror. Like, it's not super graphic. I mean, there are detailed parts, but it's not extremely scary all the time in the way that you would expect a horror to be. But this book was just more scary because of the situation that the survivors were put in, and it made me really feel for them. However, I do kind of appreciate the story because of Constanza's victory and how she doesn't even honor her abuser by naming him. Honestly, I think that A Dowry of Blood is such a powerful book. I highly recommend it for those who are wanting the vibes, but who are also wanting to read a beautiful survival story. And speaking of Dracula reimaginings, I have one here for the vibes. This one is #DRCL Midnight Children 1. So I've only read the the first one. I'm not too sure if the other ones are out in English as I'm filming this right now, but I pretty much picked this up because I love A Dowry of Blood and I wanted a Never Dracula reimagining. And while this Dracula reimagining did not give me the vibes that A Dowry of Blood gave me, I still very much enjoyed it. I love this one, especially because of its art style. I did struggle with the story a little bit because I'm not a huge fan of historical fiction, and this manga is very much a historical fiction. However, the beautiful art style throughout is just gorgeous, and I'm just so obsessed with it. It definitely gave me all the vibes. Like, I just have to show you those panels. So pretty. If you're wanting something that's like atmospheric, is a Dracula reimagining, and is a manga, I would highly, highly, highly recommend #DRCL. I did enjoy the story. It will continue on. I'm not too sure if this is going to be a duet or if it's going to progress from there, but I am very much looking forward to seeing the progression of the story as it goes along. This one also very much has the spooky scary vibes. It's a little bit creepy, and yeah, it gets graphic at times, but not necessarily as graphic as some of the other recommendations I will give in this video. And this next recommendation goes out to my comedy lovers. I would highly recommend Zone 100 for the Halloween period. This one was so funny, and it's not something I expected from this mangaka. If you guys don't know, Hado Aso is the mangaka of Alice in Borderland, which I believe I also recommended last year. Alice in Borderland is scary. But what I do appreciate about Hado Aso is the way that he writes his characters. I like the way that he writes humanity so much. This is interesting because it's comedic, and we are actually following a character who is so used to the hustle culture in work life, essentially. Our protagonist is trapped in a culture where the workplace is just telling him to hustle hard, keep working, keep striving for success, and to pretty much spend all your time at work, not have a work-life balance. And he feels like a zombie. Like, deep down inside, he's like, no, I don't want to keep doing this. I feel like life is meaningless. But then all of a sudden, an actual zombie apocalypse starts to happen, and he starts to feel alive again. He realizes that he doesn't have to live his life anymore of like constantly being in the office, working hard, working his way up to impress anyone anymore. He doesn't have to do that anymore. He doesn't have to live that life anymore. He can just be full of adrenaline through the zombie apocalypse and just take it day by day. And it's so interesting because personally, I'm terrified of zombies. I initially did not want to pick Zone 100 up because I am terrified of zombies. I cannot watch The Walking Dead. I can't watch anything to do with zombies for adrenaline. I just hate the idea of zombies. They're gross. They're disgusting. I don't understand why people love watching zombies so much. But then again, I kind of get it because the adrenaline is real. I understand that so many watchers of The Walking Dead or so many other zombie properties want to experience the adrenaline of the zombie apocalypse, but at the very same time, not live in it. And if I were to be honest, I'm terrified to continue on with Zone 100, but at the very same time, Hado Aso wrote Zone 100, and he wrote this protagonist, and he wrote the characters in the story, and I personally believe that we're gonna see some Alice in Borderland themes in the story, but it's gonna be a little bit more comedic than Alice in Borderland, because if anything, Alice in Borderland is more like Squid Game, and Zone 100 is a little bit more comedic because it's about the protagonist finally appreciating the life that he has and finally finding an upside to life because he hated life before the zombie apocalypse. I can't wait to continue on with this read. I don't know if I'm gonna watch the anime personally because I do struggle with watching anything zombie-like. However, if it's in black and white, it is easier to stomach for me. The final horror manga I have to recommend, I specifically read in the lead up to this video, and I'm so happy I did because, oh my goodness, Tomie is one I would recommend for a good, spooky, and creepy read. Now, if you didn't know, Tomie is essentially an anthology series. I believe that Tomie was initially published as a 3-volume manga series, but every story in Tomie is a short story. And some of the stories in the Tomie anthology make reference to each other, but they all have a very similar theme. And this horror anthology is quite a creepy one. I did personally appreciate my read of it, but there were some stories that made me feel very unsettled. And funnily enough, this was my very first Junji Ito tome I've ever read. I mean, honestly, I don't know whether I should have started off with a shorter work by Junji Ito, but what I do know is that I am just so glad that I stuck this one out. Tomie is not an easy read. Because it's an anthology, I would highly recommend you space this read out. I spaced this read out for around like 2 weeks to a month. I don't remember how long it took me to read Tomie. I think it was like 3 weeks. I decided to read a few stories and then put it down, read a few stories and then put it down, and that just made it a little bit more digestible for me. This one is definitely kind of big on the gore. It's not Junji Ito's scariest work, according to those who have read Junji Ito. However, it's still very creepy, and it has a very interesting message about how some people treat survivors. I felt sorry for Tomie at some points, but at the very same time, I could see that Tomie was slowly starting to lose her humanity, and it made me kind of hate her at the same time because she is not flawless. She's not the flawless survivor. However, this anthology also made me very angry at how some people talk about abuse survivors. It just made me really, really sad. So yeah, Tomie does get depressing, but if you're wanting something that's really spooky and really creepy for Halloween, this one is it. And the second last spooky and creepy book I have to recommend is for my dark romance lovers. Yeah, I don't think I could proceed with this video without talking about the Cat and Mouse Duet. This duology made me feel really unsettled. I enjoyed it. And as I mentioned when I was talking about Zom 100, I totally understand why there are fans of zombie media based on the fact that the viewers kind of love the adrenaline. Like, I get that. That is kind of why I've started to dive into dark romance, because I want to experience the adrenaline of a dark romance. And I'm not gonna lie, that is kind of why I enjoyed the Cat and Mouse Duet. And I don't think that I could make a video about creepy and spooky reads without talking about the Cat and Mouse Duet. I would highly recommend this dark romance to those who are wanting a very, very morally dark romance. And I'm gonna be real here. This isn't even the most graphic out of the books I'm gonna recommend. The next book I've gotta recommend is also written by H.D. Carlton. That's even more graphic than the Cat and Mouse Duet or Haunting Adeline. But oh my goodness, this was a lot at times. And the first intimate interaction with the two main characters, oh, it made me feel uncomfortable. But what I do find very interesting about the Cat and Mouse Duet is that the two characters, they get off on fear. So technically that is why the Cat and Mouse Duet is meant to be a creepy read. I'm gonna be honest, like, even though Haunting Adeline was like creepy in a fun way, Haunting Adeline is creepy and scary in a very real way. Because Adeline is going through something very real that just so happens to be the fear of many women out here. This entire duology is terrifying. I believe the first book is terrifying purely because of the games that these two are playing, but the second book does not feel like a game. The second book very much feels real, and it is terrifying to me personally, and I believe to those who have read the series. That is why a lot of people prefer the first book, but I did want to highlight the second book as well, because if we're talking about survival stories like A Dowry of Blood and Tomie, then I believe we should also bring up that Haunting Adeline is also a survival story as well. This, I would definitely read for the vibes. This book series definitely has the vibes. It's definitely for horror lovers and for those who love dark romances, like morally dark. I'm not even gonna say morally grey. This is not a morally grey romance. This is a morally dark romance. And look, there are things that I did not like about Zaid, but at the very same time, I could not put this book series down. I was addicted. This duet actually leads into the final spooky and creepy book recommendation I have for this video. And this, I'd have to say, is the most graphic one out of all of them. And that, my friends, is Satan's Affair by H.D. Carlton. This takes place within the same world as Haunting and Haunting Adeline, the Cat and Mouse Duet. Satan's Affair is a short book. I believe it's only 200 pages. Okay, my version's not even 200 pages. It's 144 pages. Whoa, whoa. Yeah, so it is a short story, not really a short story, but like a short prequel slash sequel companion to Haunting Adeline. The events of the story take place during Haunting Adeline. However, we're getting Sibby's backstory here. It's really graphic. And I actually went into Satan's Affair, right, not knowing that this was a companion to Haunting Adeline. I initially wanted to read it first before going into Haunting Adeline to just kind of get a feel for H.D. Carlton's writing style, right? When I was reading this book, I had to run into the bathroom because I felt so nauseous. What happens in this book is extremely graphic. There are trigger warnings at the very beginning of the book. I'm gonna see if I can find the trigger warning page. That is That's one lot of a trigger warning. But I do have to note that the audiobooks to H.G. Carlton's series, or H.G. Carlton's books, they do not have the trigger warnings at the very beginning of the audiobook. So please read the synopsis of the audiobooks or read the Goodreads synopsis. Hopefully the Goodreads synopsis does have the trigger warnings, because I was not expecting what I got. I felt really sick and really gross. This was probably the first graphic horror I've ever read. I felt really grossed out, to the point that I thought that at the time, Haunting Adeline and Hunting Adeline were much more tame. But then again, it really depends on your triggers, honestly. I'd have to say, out of all the books I recommended on this list, this one right here is the most disgusting. This one definitely grossed me out. And if you do struggle with mental health being a plot twist, I would proceed with caution if you were wanting to proceed. I did not necessarily fully agree with the plot twist because I don't know if the representation was done well. I know that the author was trying to be as respectful as possible to Sibby's condition. However, personally, I just need to see if there are reviewers who have a similar condition who agree with the representation, because I'm honestly not too sure if there are many yet, but I should do my research on that. I don't know if I will return to it. Maybe I'll read a few chapters, but I will probably skip over the gory scenes because they were incredibly detailed and they have definitely scarred me for life. So I guess that's gonna be it for this video today, book lovers. If you happen to stay till the end of the video, leave me the black heart emoji because we just talked about some dark books. And if you happen to enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already, join the amazing community of book lovers. And also, I have social medias. I'm at GSwizzle Books on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also at Goodreads. That's www.goodreads.com/gswizzle. And finally, I'm at TikTok. I'm at GSwizzle on TikTok if you want to follow me there for some bookish content. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace.
Started out with half and I flipped it into double. Started out with half and I flipped it into double.